The third prince fell in love with a foot-washing maid and was determined to make her his concubine. Yet, he did not know that the maid was a spy from a rival kingdom. I loyally advised the emperor, informing him of the matter. The third prince praised the Gu family for their loyalty. But after ascending to the throne, he had my entire Gu family executed. It was then that I realized he had always resented me for causing the death of the foot-washing maid. Reborn into this life, the third prince once again sought permission to make the foot-washing maid his concubine. I knelt and apologized. I, as a daughter of the Gu family, am willing to annul the engagement and give up my position as the primary consort. On mid-autumn night, the officials gathered to offer their congratulations. The emperor personally set the wedding date between me and the third prince, Su Machin. Just as his words fell, Su Machin stepped forward, leading someone behind him. Su Machin knelt and spoke with firm resolve. "Father, I wish to take Roer as a concubine alongside the primary consort. In my previous life, I felt that Su Machin's actions trampled on the Gu family's honor. I immediately fell to the ground, pleading with the emperor for justice. But to my shock, Su Machin claimed that Bai Rou had already borne him an heir and could not be wronged. For the sake of the heir, the emperor issued a marriage decree. Now, having been reborn, I would never be so foolish as to put myself in such a difficult position." Su Machin, seeing the emperor's dark expression, grew fearful. He quickly turned his gaze toward me, his eyes filled with pleading. "Father, the matter of the concubine was approved by Mo Li himself. I hope you can grant this favor." In the hall, the ministers gasped in surprise. Bai Rou, dressed in brocade, appeared on the verge of tears, a hint of shyness in her demeanor. Her youthful beauty was on full display. I let out a cold laugh. "Since you are so in love, I will certainly support you." I rose and knelt in the center of the hall. "Your Majesty, it is not for a mere subject like me to decide whom the third prince takes as a concubine. But this maid has already borne an heir, and it would be wrong to mistreat her." The discussions in the hall grew even more intense. The emperor shot Su Machin a sharp glance. Su Machin, seeing my plea for him, felt his heart lighten, completely forgetting to consider the emperor's will. He quickly vowed not to neglect his primary wife and would strictly control Bai Rou. The emperor seemed to relax at his promise. I seized the opportunity, quickly bowing my head and saying, "I am willing to give up my position as the primary consort and accompany my father to defend the border, ensuring the people live in peace." The emperor did not respond. He handed me a marriage decree without a name, an attempt to soothe me and to solidify his bond with my father. The engagement between Su Machin and me was annulled. But Bai Rou, of low status, could not become the third prince's concubine. She could only be a servant concubine. I had just left the emperor's hall when Su Machin stopped me. His gaze was filled with pain. But after witnessing the brutal deaths of my entire family in the previous life, I now found him repulsive and horrifying. "Mo Li, why did you annul the engagement? Don't you wish to be my princess?" I recalled my discussion with the Prime Minister, Si Yinchen, from the previous night. I concealed my disgust and said, "Your Highness, you wish to marry that maid in front of the ministers and bring her into the palace with me. If I had agreed, my father would have been forced to act and seek justice for me. I annulled the engagement for your sake, but now you misunderstand me." I gently wiped away the tears that had started to form. Seeing my distress, Su Machin's face softened with sympathy. "Mo Li, this is my fault. If that lowly maid hadn't climbed into my bed, we wouldn't have ended up in such a difficult situation. Don't worry, after she gives birth, I will send her away, and you will raise the child." His words seemed sincere, but they were nothing but empty promises. Had he not needed my father's support, he would have already fallen into Bai Rou's arms. I refused to engage in conversation any longer. I found an excuse to leave. As I walked along the long corridor, the oppressive atmosphere around me made me bitterly smile. This was the place I had desperately tried to enter in my past life. My father and the emperor had been childhood playmates. He helped the emperor ascend the throne and saved him multiple times. Their bond was deep. Because of my father, I was showered with the emperor's favor. I was born and granted the title, Precious Pearl Princess. The emperor had hoped for me to marry into the royal family. During my free time, my wet nurse would take me to the palace to play with the emperor's 4 sons. At the time, I favored the eldest prince. He would gently hold me, fulfilling my every whim. But he died in a great fire. After that, Su-machin began appearing around me frequently. Perhaps because we were of similar age, or perhaps because I had reached the age of blossoming feelings. I lost myself in his repeated calls of Emily. A few days before my coming-of-age ceremony, he found me. He placed a glowing pearl in my palm, his eyes filled with hope. Emily, your coming-of-age ceremony is soon. Will you marry me? I blushed, nodding slightly. It was then that I decided to see the world with him. On the day of my coming-of-age ceremony, I knelt before the emperor to request a marriage decree. But after the decree was given, Su-machin seemed to change. His eyes turned cold, and he began to distance himself from me. You little girl, what are you thinking? Why don't you watch where you're going? A sharp pain struck my forehead, and tears filled my eyes. Si-yunchin froze for a moment, then pulled me into his arms, gently comforting me. He was as gentle as he had been when we were children, his eyes full of sympathy. I gently tugged at his dark hair, hearing him wince in pain, and smiled at the sound. He gazed at me, helplessly shaking his head, before lifting me into the carriage. As I lay on his lap, I traced his brow bone with my fingers. During this month of being reborn, he stayed by my side every day, just like this. He, too, had been reborn. He had witnessed the tragic sight of my death and harbored deep resentment. We were like lost souls, drawing warmth from each other. In the previous life, when he returned carrying my father's body, he saw me, covered in wounds, my body hung at the military gate. His eyes, bloodshot with rage, had executed Su-machin in front of the city gate. After setting the court affairs in order, he had taken his own life before the military gate. Such loyalty I could never repay in this life. Seeing that I was lost in thought, he gently patted my shoulder. I slowly closed my eyes. Gu Emoli is not qualified to sit on this empress throne. I will avenge my wife and child, Su-machin said. He stepped hard on my belly. The intense pain spread through my limbs, and I felt as though I was being torn apart. Your Majesty, this is our child. You can't be so cruel. I pleaded. Oh, is that so? My child can only be born by rower. You, a shameless woman, are not worthy, Su-machin said. He tore off my fingernails. Then he severed my tendons in my hands and feet. I was powerless to resist. I could only pray desperately that I could bring Su-machin back to his senses. Your Majesty, that maid is a spy from the enemy country. How can you disregard the bigger picture just for her? I begged. So, what if she's a spy? I am willing to give up the throne for her, and yet you, this vile woman, dare to expose her, causing the death of my wife and child. Su-machin said. Having hated me for 3 years, how could he listen to me? He brought a knife and cut out my tongue. The excruciating pain felt like my heart was being torn out, and I lost consciousness. When I opened my eyes again, I was still in a living hell. I looked at Su-machin with despair. I wished I could kill him on the spot, the man I had loved for so many years. After I gave everything to help him ascend to the throne, he slaughtered my entire Gu family. And I, the one who had been with him all along, was subjected to inhumane torture. Then there was my child. Someone forced me to drink an abortion potion. The fetus in my womb had already taken form, yet it was forcibly removed from my body. I looked at the bloody mess, and I wished I could skin Su-machin alive. Perhaps my hatred was too intense. Su-machin ordered someone to gouge out my eyes. Just as I was about to die, he had me hung in the Wu gate. He wanted the world to see my viciousness. I hung in midair, my skin sizzling under the scorching sun. As I was about to die, I heard a gentle, concerned voice. Lear. I forced my eyes open and saw Si Yun-chin looking at me with worry. I looked around and realized I was no longer in the carriage. Tears covered my face. Though I had been reborn, the pain I endured before was still a real experience. That night, Sue Emo-chun and I called off our engagement. Perhaps I was bidding farewell to the past in my heart, which caused this nightmare. I'm fine. Why are you on my bed again? What will you do if you marry a lady later? I asked. Si Yun-chin squinted his eyes and looked at me with a deep gaze. He was handsome, with a chiseled profile. His hooked nose added a sharp edge to his appearance. People might think he was stern and hard to get along with. But in my eyes, he was perfect. For a moment, I found myself mesmerized by him. Hearing his grunt, my cheeks flushed red. Little girl, do you want a husband? No, not at all. Don't ruin my reputation, I explained nervously as the room fell into complete silence. Si Yun-chin stopped teasing and sat up straight, looking at me seriously. You and Sue Emo-chin called off the engagement, and in his eyes, it's just a temporary thing. If he resorts to trickery, you'll still end up marrying him. What Si Yun-chin said was true. How could I not know? But the imperial power was something I couldn't resist. Right now, I needed to think of a perfect plan. Seeing me frown, he sighed helplessly. He tapped me on the head with an imperial edict, his tone laced with contempt. Such an easy solution, and you're still so troubled. I shot him an annoyed look, massaging my aching forehead. I can't just marry any random man. Even if I did, who would I marry? It can't be you, can it? Oh, we've already shared a bed, and now you don't want to marry me? Who else do you want to marry? Si Yun-chin laughed, his eyes showing a hint of anger. It seemed like he didn't understand why I was saying this. His rough hand gripped the back of my neck, his warm breath brushing against my ear. Guemoli, you can only marry me. A crack formed in my cold heart. You know, in my past life, I was married to someone else. Should I tell you that in my past life, I also married someone else? Why are you so foolish? If I despised you, why would I have stayed with you for so long? The moonlight was heavy, and we unlocked our hearts. I wrote our names on the imperial edict. At this moment, we were already betrothed. We just had to pick a good day for the wedding. Si Yun-chin looked at the writing with a silly grin on his face. He carefully rolled up the edict and placed it gently in the scroll. Mo Lee, I will never fail you. The mosquito net fell, and the room was filled with warmth. Si Yun-chin and I were in the garden bonding. A servant came to announce that Sue Emo-chun had arrived in the hall. Si Yun-chin and I exchanged a glance before walking out. Sue Emo-chun wasn't with his favorite concubine, yet he came to my house to be despised. Bai Ro, dressed in a green palace gown, was sitting sideways on Sue Emo-chun's lap, sipping the tea he had handed her. Her gaze was provocative. Her body leaned even closer to Sue Emo-chun. This scene made me roll my eyes secretly. She truly was something unworthy of public display. Third prince, the two of you are behaving like this in my house. Do you not care about my father at all? I asked. Sue Emo-chun hurriedly helped Bai Ro up when he heard my voice. Such an opportunity to flaunt, Bai Ro would never let go. She slouched on Sue Emo-chun as if boneless. Older sister, please don't be offended. I'm just unwell, and the prince is worried about me, Bai Ro said. How dare you, you lowly concubine, speak to me as if we're sisters? I retorted, swinging my arm and slapping her face. Sue Emo-chun couldn't be touched right now. But a powerless concubine like her wanted to dominate my general's house? Dream on. Your Highness, Bai Ro whimpered, covering her face with a handkerchief. No matter who I am, I belong to His Highness. How can she treat His Highness this way? Sue Emo-chun reprimanded Bai Ro in a deep voice, reminding her of her place. Bai Ro stomped her feet, holding her handkerchief and crying loudly. I watched coldly. If Sue Emo-chun wasn't gritting his teeth, hands clenched tight, I'd almost think he was really trying to reconcile with me. Not wanting to watch their act, I directly asked what business brought the third prince here. The autumn hunt is in 2 days. This prince asked the emperor for permission to invite you to attend, Su Emo-chun replied. After sending off Su Emo-chun and Bai Rou, I began to recall the events of the hunting ground in my past life. I got so lost in thought that I didn't notice Si Yunchen standing behind me. He took my hand gently, his face showing coldness. It seems Su Machin can't hold back anymore. Our plan needs to move forward, said Si Yunchen. It's no wonder he would think this way. Given Su Machin's vengeful nature, the invitation to the hunt was suspicious. To avoid jeopardizing our plan, Si Yunchen returned to his mansion the night before the hunt. Before leaving, he held me tightly, unwilling to let go. Lear, a month away, don't forget your husband while I'm gone, he said, his tone softer than usual. He no longer carried the cold, decisive air he'd once had. I teased him, the esteemed prime minister, second only to the emperor, yet here you are, so worried and uncertain. You know, Si Yunchen replied calmly, though his gaze was filled with determination. I've come back from my rebirth to protect you. I want everything to go well for you. His words warmed my heart, and I felt a flow of warmth inside. He wanted me to express my feelings, and I decided not to be shy or reserved. I wrapped my arms around his neck and kissed his cool lips. Si Yunchen looked surprised for a moment but soon took control, pulling me closer. As we became more intimate, he buried his head in my neck. Darling, in the future, be more reserved. Don't tease your husband too much, or I might not be able to control myself. I closed my eyes and ignored him. He chuckled softly and, almost playfully, bit my ear. By the time I had composed myself, Si Yunchen was already dressed in his fine robes. He looked at me with a longing gaze and placed a gentle kiss on my forehead. After he left, I tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. It wasn't until dawn that I finally felt sleepy. But before I could rest, I heard the voice of a maid stopping someone at the door. Your Highness, you cannot enter. My lady is in seclusion. How can you act so rashly and make her uncomfortable? I didn't hesitate and quickly got up to dress. After all, in Su Machin's eyes, I was one of the few who could help him ascend to the throne. If he could marry me, he would use any method necessary to achieve his goal. I had just reached the door when it was opened from the outside. Without thinking, I raised my hand to slap the person who entered. Su Machin covered his cheek, and his eyes were filled with anger. I gave him a respectful bow and said, I did not realize it was your highness. I thought it was some rogue intruding. Please forgive me. Su Machin, feeling guilty, didn't argue. He waved his hand, signaling me to rise. I smiled faintly as I pressed the heat in my palm. These small victories were not enough. When we arrived, Si Yunchen was already standing behind the emperor. He looked at Su Machin with murderous intent, clearly aware of what was happening today. The show was about to begin. Sure enough, as soon as Su Machin mounted his horse, the horse suddenly bolted forward, throwing him to the ground in a very embarrassing way. When he tried to dismount, another servant accidentally bumped into him. I couldn't help but laugh at the childishness of it all. Si Yunchen glanced over at me when he saw me laughing, a small smile playing on his lips. At the emperor's urging, our group made its way to the hunting grounds. The carriage swayed along the way. I looked outside and saw the familiar scenery. I had seen it all in my previous life, but now, seeing it again, it filled me with a sense of coldness. I closed my eyes and thought about the words the servant had passed to me earlier. The bait is ready. Wait for the hook, be careful, and I'll handle everything. Originally, I had planned to use the hunt to bury Su Machin here, but that idea had been vetoed by Si Yunchen the night before. The suffering from the past life can't be erased with one stroke, he had said. Since that was the case, I would make him lose what he cared about most instead. Father, today I wish to draw first blood for the young masters of each family. Would that be acceptable? Of course. This is your first hunt, and I look forward to seeing you return victorious. The emperor immediately agreed to Su Machin's suggestion. Noblemen and women also sought to make a name for themselves at this moment. After all, to be noticed by the emperor meant endless wealth and honor. Sumachin had someone bring over the drawing lot barrel. He gave a signal to a young servant, and I immediately knew this was part of a plot against me. With calm composure, I drew a lot from the barrel. It was the same color as Sumachin's. In the next moment, Sumachin appeared by my side, his gaze tender, as if he wanted to consume me whole. Even his voice was filled with overwhelming affection. Emily, today this prince will win the first prize for you. I will ask father for permission to grant us another marriage, he said, his tone gentle. I lowered my head shyly, playing the role of a young maiden. Thank you for your love, your highness, I replied. The sound of hooves echoed through the hunting ground. The crowd fell silent, almost as if muted. The sound of arrows slicing through the air rang out. One arrow flew straight toward me. I had no time to react, and I was about to be struck. Be careful. Sumachin's voice rang out just as a sharp sound pierced the air, followed by the sound of something sharp embedding into flesh. A wave of red flooded my vision, and I quickly dismounted to cover his shoulder. His soft, soothing words made my eyes well up with tears. To repay Sumachin's life-saving grace, I stayed by his side every day, taking care of him. The emperor watched as we returned to our usual closeness. The night before we returned to the palace, the emperor summoned Sumachin to his tent. I was in the tent, preparing to rest, when a maidservant arrived from Sumachin's side. Princess, His Majesty has sent sweet soup, and His Highness instructed me to deliver it to you. I glared at Siyunchin, who was covering my mouth, signaling for him to let go of me. An hour earlier, Siyunchin had crossed paths with Sumachin in the emperor's tent. Afterward, he headed straight to my camp. He pinned me to the bed, kissing me so deeply that my head spun. Little girl, have I neglected you recently, being so busy with my plans? Have I allowed you to grow so close to Sumachin? I placed my hands in front of me to distance our bodies. Don't say that. You have your calculations and I have mine. It's much better for both of us to act together than alone. I have a blood feud with him. How could I let myself fall into his schemes again? My words seemed to please Siyunchin. He smiled and tapped my forehead, though his words were tinged with jealousy. Don't get too close to him, or I won't be able to sleep at night. I fear he will seduce you with his sweet words or use some trick to hurt you. He furrowed his brows, his face full of concern. I couldn't help but feel a mix of amusement and pity as I reached up to smooth the crease between his brows. Don't worry, I won't leave you. Now I had every piece of leverage in my hands. All that remained was to wait for the right opportunity. The maid outside kept urging me. I got up, tidied my disheveled clothes, and walked out. The maid's eyes darted nervously, betraying her anxiety. I focused on the sweet soup. It seemed the problem lay here. I sneered inwardly, but spoke in a softer tone. This sweet soup truly smells delightful. It has already begun to smell sweet in such a short time. But I just had some pastries earlier, so I must decline His Highness's kind offer. The prince ordered me to deliver this soup to you. It nourishes and beautifies, and it's very beneficial for the princess. You must drink it, the maid replied, her voice insistent. It seemed this sweet soup was something I had to drink. I took the bowl from her hands and drank it all at once. The maid smiled as she watched the empty bowl, then bowed and left respectfully. Back in my tent, a wave of desolation swept over me. I thought back to my past life. Whether as a maiden in waiting or as the third prince's consort, I had done everything in my power to help Sumachin rise to the highest position. Yet I never imagined he would send me his schemes so early. Lying on the bed, I looked at the ceiling coldly, waiting for his next move. Soon, my body began to react strangely. An indescribable heat surged within me, unbearable and relentless. I struggled to keep calm, pinching my arms hard to steady myself. Sumachin truly had a ruthless heart. He was trying to use this tactic to ruin my reputation. Just as I was thinking this, Sumachin walked in from outside. He looked at me, blurred in consciousness on the bed. The facade of kindness on his face was now completely exposed. Guemoli, why can't you be obedient like before? Why did you refuse our engagement? Is it because of Si Yunqing? He actually dared to ask for your hand in front of father, truly overestimating himself. You belong to me. You can only be mine. How could you marry someone else? His expression was wild and manic, clearly believing that victory was within his grasp. I stopped pretending. I looked at him with eyes full of hatred. You only see me as a stepping stone. Why should I be your puppet? His face quickly shifted back to one of tenderness and affection. I truly have feelings for you. If you think Bai Ro is in your way, I will send her away. His tone was casual, and he had said more than once that he would send Bai Ro out of the house. The sincerity in his eyes seemed real, as if he wasn't trying to deceive me. But in my past life, he had destroyed the Gu family. It wasn't simply about avenging Bai Ro. There was something far more sinister at play. Before Su Machin could say more, I no longer cared. I was desperately trying to recall what had gone wrong. In my absent-mindedness, I gave Su Machin the opportunity he needed. He pinned me down. I couldn't help but curse Si Yunqing for being unreliable. It had been half an hour, and he still hadn't finished. If this continued, I'd really be bullied. I should have listened to Si Yunqing earlier and taken the antidote. In my frustration, I reached for the stone I had hidden under my pillow. I struck Su Machin with it, knocking him unconscious. The sky was just beginning to brighten when shouts of discord echoed from the third prince's camp. The sharp voices woke everyone around us. What came into view was a scene of disarray. Two people, naked, were entangled on the bed. When the crowd rushed in, Su Machin was furious. But upon closer inspection, there was a glimmer of joy in his eyes. You wretched fools who allowed you to enter? The ministers and their families who had come running knelt on the ground. But they didn't stop talking. I muttered softly behind the crowd. Oh my, could the third prince have lost his mind, indulging in such an affair with a minister's daughter? How shameless. Others picked up the conversation. Isn't that true? Who knows which minister's daughter this is? Shameless beyond belief. To think the third prince, who looks so proper, could be doing such disgraceful things. How can his behavior be compared to that of the first prince? The murmurs grew louder. Looking at Su Machin's pale face, I couldn't help but smile. The humiliation I had suffered before was 100, 1,000 times worse than this. And now he couldn't even endure this? No rush. There were still grander surprises waiting for him. You wretched fool. You've completely disgraced the royal family. The emperor arrived, and upon seeing the scene, he exploded in fury. Those who had gathered to watch quickly knelt on either side, fearful of being implicated. Su Machin seemed to have found some protection and quickly got off the bed. Father, I acted in a moment of weakness and lost my composure. Please, Father, grant me and Mo Li's marriage and allow us to be together. As I continued to gloat, Su Machin dragged me into the mess. I quickly adjusted my facial expression, then cried out loudly, flinging my handkerchief as I knelt before the emperor. Your Majesty, the third prince has ruined the reputation of this subject's daughter. I ask that you do justice for me. Seeing me, Su Machin's face instantly turned white. He looked at me in disbelief, then frantically yanked the blanket from the bed. The people watching began to guess who the person in the bed was. It can't be. Last night, it was clearly Gu Mo Li. How could this be? Su Machin went mad, flipping over the woman in the bed. The tent fell into complete silence. Then, everyone knelt again. Disgraceful. Unfilial son. You won't even spare my concubines. The emperor, in his rage, kicked Su Machin to the ground and ordered the guards to restrain both of them. Everyone present was on edge. To witness such a royal secret, any slip-up could cost them their heads. The journey back to the capital was no longer as lively as it had been on the way there. The entourage kept a low profile. No one wanted to become the next royal scandal scapegoat. Last night, Su Machin was knocked unconscious by me. After a tease time, Si Yunqing finally entered. He looked at the man lying on the floor, and the corner of his mouth twitched. He then kicked him a few times before dragging him back to his camp. When he returned, he touched the heat on my body and couldn't help but frown. "Why are you still so hot? Didn't you take the antidote?" When the little maid came with the soup earlier, Si Yunqing had already placed various antidotes on the table. Along with the bottles, there was also a note he had left. It read, "When the time is right, revenge will be ours." To avoid arousing Su Machen's suspicion, I took the antidote only just before he entered. But what I hadn't expected was that the timing Si Yunqing had mentioned referred to the emperor's consort Rong. From Si Yunqing, I learned that many of Su Machen's actions had consort Rong's involvement. The two had been together even before Su Machen tied his hair. I knelt beside the emperor, my head bowed to the ground. I reported to the emperor all about Su Machen secretly stockpiling troops, privately mining gold, and colluding with external forces. Along with that, I also exposed Bai Ro's identity as a spy. Hearing all of this, the emperor's face turned ashen. He immediately turned to Si Yunqing to conduct a thorough investigation. "Gu Mo Li, how did you come by all this information? You should know that you cannot slander the third prince's reputation." I understood. As a woman, knowing such things would undoubtedly raise suspicion. So I had prepared myself from the start. After the emperor asked, I explained calmly. When I was looking after the third prince in the hunting grounds, I noticed he was sending messages by pigeon every day, which raised my doubts. One time, when I went to deliver some medicine to the prince, I saw him in contact with an assassin from an enemy nation. I was horrified and dared not withhold this from your majesty. I wasn't sure if my explanation had convinced the emperor, but the cold aura that had been hanging over my head had finally dissipated. He looked down at the evidence and didn't instruct me to rise. I knew then that my life was spared. The royal family is the most heartless of all. At this moment, it felt as though I were petting a tiger on its back. One wrong move, and I could fall into ruin. It wasn't until Si Yunqing returned with more evidence that the emperor swept everything from the table and ordered Su Machen to be imprisoned. With tear-streaked cheeks, the emperor grabbed Si Yunqing's hand, speechless. I silently rose and stepped back, giving them space to reconcile, and walked toward the prison. Su Machen struggled fiercely when he was captured. Now covered in dust, he looked utterly disheveled. Upon seeing me, his eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. "It was you who caused that night's events. Why are you trying to ruin me?"
Why?
"I gave my heart to you, and you were using me. I thought we'd grow old together, but you wanted to make that lowly maid your concubine." Hatred flashed in my eyes, and it stunned Su Machen into silence. I had devoted myself to him and the country, yet he slaughtered my entire family. I didn't speak those words aloud,
For they hadn't happened in this life.
If I had said them, it would only raise suspicion. Su Machen wasn't wrong in his guess. That night, I had lured him to my tent. The entire hunting trip had been Si Yunqing's suggestion. Originally, the emperor had planned to change the autumn hunt to a reward ceremony due to his ill health. But after some persuasion, the emperor had given Si Yunqing full responsibility. The assassination attempt in the hunting grounds? That was all Si Yunqing creating the perfect opportunity. Had he stayed in bed obediently, Si Yunqing would never have been able to gather the evidence. Hearing all this, Su Machen collapsed into a frenzy. "You vile woman! Just like your father, so obstinate, always blocking my path. You deserve to die. If I had known you would do this to me today, I would have killed you and your father when I killed the crown prince." His fury made him lose control of his words. Upon learning that the emperor planned to make the crown prince's heir, Su Machen was filled with rage. He thought that only by killing the crown prince would he have a chance to ascend to power. So, during the Lantern Festival banquet, he poured oil into the crown prince's bedchamber. As fireworks were set off in the imperial garden, he threw a fire starter onto the oil. In an instant, the crown prince's palace was engulfed in flames. By the time the fire was extinguished, the crown prince had perished in the blaze. Su Machen felt triumphant. The remaining princes posed no threat to him. What he didn't expect, however, was that the crown prince had been saved by my father and was not dead, only unconscious. My father, unguarded, told the imperial teacher about this. The imperial teacher noticed the problem and advised my father to keep the crown prince hidden and not to make it public. But someone must have leaked the news, and Su Machin found out. For the next 3 years, Su Machin relentlessly searched for the crown prince's whereabouts, sending people to follow my father. He wanted to kill my father, but feared that without him, he wouldn't be able to sit on the throne. After much contemplation, he began to plot to marry me, using me as leverage to control my father. Once he ascended the throne, it would be the end of the Gu family. Hearing Su Machin's words, I almost laughed to tears. No wonder. The person who had never shown interest in speaking to me began to show concern. In the previous life, he had carried out these plans successfully. The prison had already been secured by Si Yunqing's men. I took off the hairpin from my head and walked step by step towards Su Machin. These plans, you did carry them out in the previous life. My entire family was slaughtered by your hands. I was reborn just to make you pay for everything you did. I looked like I had crawled out of hell, my face filled with hatred. I severed the tendons in his limbs one by one. The sound of his anguished screams echoed through the prison. But it wasn't enough. This wasn't enough. I heated a branding iron in the brazier. The prison filled with the stench of burning flesh. At first, Su Machin cursed and swore. But in the end, all that was left was him begging for mercy, his mind slipping into delirium. I was wrong. Please spare me. I sneered. Too late. I wanted to carve open his abdomen with a knife and avenge my dead child. But no, I couldn't do that. Si Yunqing's revenge had not yet been carried out. I couldn't be this selfish. So instead, I slashed at him repeatedly. Blood spilled out, and I sprinkled powder on it to stop the bleeding. Slowly, my eyes turned red with the blood. The redness became painful. My mind grew foggy, and I was on the verge of losing control. Someone gently took the hairpin from my hand. Si Yunqing wrapped his arm around my shoulders, soothing me with soft words. It's okay, Lear. It's all over. In his gentle coaxing, I slowly snapped out of my trance. Seeing that I had returned to my senses, he walked up to Su Machin. He removed the mask from his face. You're actually Su Yuni. That's right. Si Yunqing was Su Yuni, the crown prince of the Daong dynasty. At that time, my father had saved him from the fire. At his request, my father had staged his death to get him away from the palace's turmoil. But as soon as they left the palace gates, he collapsed unconscious. My father searched for every doctor, but they all said he had been poisoned with a unique venom that had no cure. Knowing the poison came from someone in the palace, my father concealed the fact that he was still alive. To save him, he sent him to the Medicine King Valley. He didn't wake up until 2 years later, having learned the art of disguise, returning to the capital as the top scholar. After much investigation, he discovered that those who had harmed him were Su Machin and Consort Rong. Si Yunqing glanced at me, his gaze filled with affection. Lear, may I take care of the next part? Don't dirty your hands with him. You wait here. He has already inflicted enough pain on me. I haven't had my revenge yet. With that, I plunged the needle I had prepared into Su Machin's eye. The screams that came from the prison were bone-chilling. I was wrong, I was really wrong. I'll do whatever you want. I beg you, please spare me. Neither Si Yunqing nor I made a sound. We didn't stop him from kowtowing and begging for mercy. This was what he owed us from his past life. Under Si Yunqing's watchful eyes, I cut out Su Machin's tongue, just as he had once thrown mine into the fire to be reduced to ash. Seeing him in such a pathetic state, the hatred in my heart slowly dissipated. I handed the knife to Si Yunqing and walked toward the door. The prison caught fire. The once proud third prince disappeared from the pages of history. Looking at the place filled with thick black smoke, I could no longer hold back my tears and squatted down, crying bitterly. All the frustration and anguish in my heart flowed out with my tears at that moment. From now on, my Gu family no longer needed to fear the destruction of our family. The third prince perished in the flames, and the crown prince was reborn. The entire court was shaken. When the emperor learned the truth about the fire in the East Palace, He vomited blood and fell unconscious. Not long after, he passed away. Yunqing ascended to the throne. I took my entire family and moved to the border. In this second life, I just wanted to live freely and carefreely without getting involved in the palace's struggles. I lay in the desert, listening to the gossip of passers-by. There's a rumor that the empress has run away, and now the emperor has dispatched more people to search for her. I wonder what the empress was thinking. The emperor has invalidated the selection of concubines, and there will only be a wife, no concubines in the palace. At this, I felt a fleeting stir in my heart, but I quickly suppressed my emotions. Since ancient times, the emperor has always had 3 palaces and 6 courtyards. How could Yunqing give up the beautiful women surrounding him just for me? I stood up and walked toward my pastry shop. As soon as I entered, I fell into a warm embrace. "Why can't you trust me?" Yunqing's hoarse, gentle voice reached my ears. That familiar embrace and voice made my eyes redden. Though I knew his temperament, I didn't dare gamble with it. "Please, Your Majesty, let go. This is not according to the rites." "What's wrong with the rites? You are my wife as you were 3 years ago, and you still are. No one can change that." Yunqing spoke with a trembling voice. It seemed like there was a hint of grievance in it. "Your Majesty, I am a married woman. My husband's surname is Si, not Su." His laughter rang out from what I said. He took out the imperial edict from his sleeve. It bore the names of Gumalya and Su Yuni. I embarrassedly covered my eyes. I had completely forgotten that I had written those names myself. Yunqing saw what troubled me. He handed me a divorce edict. "Lear, in this life, I only wish to be with you. One life, one love. If I fail to do so, then you can divorce me." The emperor of a powerful nation saying the words divorce truly shocked me. After that day, I returned to the palace with Yunqing. Our titles were as simple as those of common folk. He called me his wife, and I called him my husband. Today was the day of my coronation as empress. Dressed in a phoenix robe, I walked step by step towards Yunqing, who stood high above. Our eyes met, and in them was deep affection. I loved Yunqing. When we wrote our names on the imperial edict, I had already made up my mind. Escaping wasn't about avoiding him. It was because I didn't want us to reach that point of hatred and death. Now, I returned because of one thing he said. The emperor was never what I truly wanted. It was for the people that I had to do it. But what I truly seek from sitting in that high position is you, Gumalya. The higher I sit, the colder it gets, full of schemes. I'm too lonely, and I fear losing you. Leaving was because of love, and returning was also for love. We stood together in the high position, accepting the bowing of ministers. We shared a smile, and in our eyes, there was only each other. End of the story.